Welcome back to VexHexGames. On today's episode, we're covering everything I dislike about the Dragon Age series. Make sure to check out my last video on my likes. The first thing I think they could have done differently was shorten down the game so that some of the more useless or tedious parts were more streamlined to focus on important missions or companion quests that actually gave heart to the world. Personally, the Landsmeet annoys me, and I hate Anora's entire side quest and plotline. I also dislike the backgrounds for the characters you chose in the beginning of Origins and their fates. I hate how triggering the city elf background is. The human background is boring and basic, and for the dwarf background, you eventually have to choose Balin or Harrowmont for king, but can't become king yourself. I also wish there were more ending options other than your warden pieces out to go and find a cure for the calling for the next 2 games, leaving most, if not all, of their friends and loved ones behind. You mean to tell me that not all of my buddies from Origins would have gladly come with me? It's bullshit. I also dislike the lack of dragons. For a game called Dragon Age Origins, I wanted more dragons. Now I know that there's actual lore for why this is and everything, but still, it annoys me. Elves and mages, and later on Kunari especially, are treated like shit throughout the entire series, and there's nothing solid done to fix this. You're under the guise that your main character gets some respect if they're an elf or a mage, or an elf and a mage, but when it comes to actually reaching some kind of satisfying answer to the problem of racism or classism, there is none as of yet. I wish we could have seen some of the lesser mainstream companions in later games rather than having to rely on DLC and the book or the comic series to find out their fates. Another thing that really irritated me, and this is something that I only found out recently even though I've played through Dragon Age Origins multiple times, is the fact that Thetis stands for the Dragon Age setting. It's dumb. I can't believe that it's that dumb and that simple, and it's so annoying that a game that is so heavily put into lore and cool backstory and plot and all of this stuff is literally just called the Dragon Age setting for its world. I can't fathom it. Okay, looking in at Dragon Age 2 now, I hate the ending of the game. Not the blowing up the Chantry part, that was fine. I just hate that there's no clear-cut resolution in Inquisition for Dragon Age 2. I get wanting to end the second game on a cliffhanger, but in Inquisition, nothing from Dragon Age 2 really matters. Varric tells the Inquisitor about Anders, and your Inquisitor can choose to help mages or Templars, and there's some dialogue about it, but when it comes to the meat and potatoes, there's no final resolution about the issue of mage rights that came to a climax in the second game. I understand that maybe they didn't want to solve that issue in Inquisition because it could be a key element for Solas's reasoning in Dreadwolf, but the build-up the second game ended on didn't seem to impact Inquisition as much as I would have liked it to, and I think that's because the game itself doesn't really provide a lot of world-deciding decisions about the fates of mages. We don't see changes being implemented and followed and affecting others in a genuine manner, so it just felt very lackluster to me. I also hate how almost all, if not all, of Hawke's blood relations die in the second game. It's a major disservice to Hawke's character, especially considering how you as a player have the opportunity to save and keep all of Hawke's found family, their friends, alive. It seems so unfair and wrong that there's nothing you can do to stop them. I get that the game was going for tragedy, but I can't stand tragedies personally as a player. I want a happy ending, and Hawke's mom's death especially served no purpose. Hawke doesn't change after her death, she's just taken out of the game, and for what? I understand when games implement pointless violence to push away of thinking home to its target audience, but that didn't feel like the case here. It felt more like the writers were fishing for some kind of shock value, and it fell flat. If an author kills off a beloved family member, there should be some kind of end effect or repercussion, not a continuation of the main story with no effect. If the man who killed Hawke's mom had been, Cullen or Zevran or even Daenerys, somebody plot relevant already, then it would have made more sense, but it was literally just some rando who you kill. It was poor writing and it served no purpose, and it was more frustrating than anything else. Here's another thing. I get that the game is supposed, in theory, to be told from Varric's perspective to entertain and inform Cassandra, but the dynamic between Anders and Fenris just seems unrealistic at times, especially in the third act. Despite their differences, they have a similar taste for justice, and it's weird that after spending almost a decade, together in Kirkwall, that they wouldn't reach some sort of mutual understanding. I wish we had seen Justice and Fenris interact more. That might have made it slightly better, I'm not sure. But the whole idea of I'm right, you're wrong mentality is covered so much in the series by everyone else that I just wanted these two to come to some kind of clearer truce and understanding. You have Fenris, who comes from the slave background, fighting against slavers and wanting to kill all of them, and then you have Anders from the mage background, and I get that there's supposed to be, this really clear disconnect between the two of them, but you would think over time that they would come to some kind of mutual understanding and agreement where all they want to do at the end of the day is stop oppressors from subjugating and hurting people. They should be able to come together on that in some understanding, even though I know that Fenris's whole shtick is against mages, and that's what Anders is. I think at the end of the game, Fenris should have said something like, Anders, I still don't trust mages. I don't believe that they're inherently good, but I have seen you heal people. Something that could kind of pave the way between them. I hate that Dog is a summon and not a genuine companion in the second game. Another thing I dislike is the Kunari and Arashok plotline in the second game. It's poorly written, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it's just a jumbled mess. And, to make matters worse, you can't fuck the Arashok. The writers tried to tie the Kunari in with Isabella's character arc and backstory, and I get all of that, but their crew-esque presence in Kirkwall could have been better written. It fell flat. I wish they had developed the sub-areas better so that when a time jump happens, you're not going to the exact same 3 or 4 houses or caves, or, smaller locations for every single side mission in Dragon Age 2. At least paint the walls or change up the design a little bit. I don't know, add some extra couches, change the floors, something. All of these areas, they were too repetitive and boring, and it did nothing for the world building. Alrighty, moving into Inquisition. I hate the religious aspect in the third game especially, where if you choose to be an elf or Kunari Inquisitor, you have to become the Herald of Andraste and eventually conform with Andrastian beliefs in some capacity, rather than keeping your own faith or your own beliefs and being known solely as the Inquisitor. Sure, the big musical number in Inquisition is great and a lot of fun and really cool, but if you're playing as a Dalish elf being forced to be known as the Herald of Andraste to get people to listen to you and follow you, that big musical number comes across as cult-ish and should be more reminiscent of a dystopian horror movie than something motivational and cheerful. For me, the map in Inquisition feels really empty. Yes, there's tons of areas to explore, but when you actually explore an area like the Hissing Waste, there's not a whole lot to do, especially when it comes to meaningful quests. Sure, you can fight a hide dragon here or there, maybe enter a subworld, or find loot, but there is not a companion quest for every area luring you in to visit everyone and to give you reason to visit everyone, other than just exploring. And even then, you explore for a little bit and then it feels like you've seen the whole area. Plus, the casual loot and armor don't matter for shit. Exploring starts to feel like a chore and makes replay value difficult for Inquisition. You need elf root for healing potions because they took away healing spells, which is one of my major gripes with Inquisition. I got 3 mages in my party, why can't any of them heal? But there's no point to collecting materials other than maybe 1 or 2 quests. Sure, you can customize armor, but after a while, why does that matter? You can create pretty good armor somewhat early on, and unless you're a shill for aesthetics, you don't really need materials for anything else, especially not an overabundance of them. Another thing that really annoys me about Inquisition is the level cap. It's terrible. Why would a player want to explore the entire world and visit all these areas when they reach level cap after only exploring maybe half of it? Corypheus's entire design sucks. Nobody cares about him. They did the Marvel thing where they took a random, obscure, annoying villain who isn't worth liking or disliking, who you are just completely indifferent on, and focus the entire plot around him. Corypheus is literally just some dude who keeps showing up to wreck shit, but not in like a fun Robbie Rotten way, but in an annoying Chad way. I didn't like that if you play as an elf inquisitor, Morrigan is the one who explains shit to you about elves. It's annoying when Solus does it, but it just doesn't make sense whenever Morrigan spoke up. She's not an elf. She has no elf background. What, just because she read some books, she's suddenly the expert on all things elf? I'm playing as an elf. If I'm playing as a Dalish elf, I should fucking know my own history. It just doesn't make sense. I dislike Liliana becoming cruel. I know that you can shape her character to help her become a cold, bloodthirsty bitch, and that started becoming a thing in Origins, or at least was alluded to becoming a thing, but I hate it. She was a lost, misguided, genuinely good character in Origins, and it's upsetting to see her character who wanted answers and wanted clarity turn to the dark side when there's so much for her to live for and believe in. She was the source of hope and positivity in Origins, and to see her not care about having others killed who have wronged her or the Inquisition in even the slightest of ways feels really off-putting, especially if you make her the new Divine. It's just a very negative path for her, and I understand why they did it, but I personally just can't stand it at all. Leaving Alistair or Hawk or whoever in the Fade was just a dick move, and I hate that the writers decided to throw that in there and then just leave it, for something to be solved or answered in Treadwolf. I wish they brought in more creatures to inhabit every area to make the areas feel more lived in and real. There are nugs everywhere, sure, but we've seen nugs in the game before. You've got an entire world to explore with Inquisition, and no new inhabitants for it? Why? It just doesn't make sense. Whatever the creature count is for each area, I wish they had doubled or tripled it with the amount of new creatures that they brought in to inhabit the spaces for our characters to be able to be introduced to and meet. You spend so much of your time in the Dragon Age Keep plugging in all of your decisions and choices from the earlier games, but in the end, whatever you chose doesn't really matter for shit in Inquisition. So I'm not sure why they spent so much time having you plug in your choices in the Dragon Age Keep. The noticeable choices that I remember actually affecting Inquisition were for the Arl of Redcliffe's son, if he was possessed by the demon then he's suicidal and sad now, who shows up for the Fade quest with you, and who is alluded to being Kieran's dad. Not a whole lot really pertains. There's some fluff for filler dialogue, but when it comes to legit effects on the game, not a lot that I can remember to make it meaningful or worth it. It's just not enough. Most of the companions don't have much of a connection to the Inquisitor or to each other, and that was another huge letdown for me with Inquisition. I am very much driven by the family trope, or found family trope elements in different games and books and movies and things. And the found family trope that we saw in the first two games just is not as prevalent here throughout Inquisition, and I think that's because the banter between the characters is not up to snub. I'm not saying it sucks, there are plenty of fantastic moments with companion conversations. Hell, we even get a side romance out of it between Dorian and the Iron Bull, but there's too much disconnect between the majority of your companions in Inquisition to make them feel like a united front, to make them feel like an actual found family. In Origins, your companions were there with you to help stop the Blight and save the world, but every one of them established a solid foundation with the others. In Inquisition, it feels almost awkward at points, and it doesn't really get better. The companions in Inquisition just don't become a family the way that your companions do in other games, and it was really a big letdown for me as a player. Which is a shame, because again, the map is so damn fucking big with plenty of opportunities for characters to not just interact, but to also have quests that intertwine their stories together. The only connection that I felt was really stable in Inquisition, or the only two connections I should say, were between Cole and Varric and Dorian and the Iron Bull. Everybody else was just kind of there for fluff pieces. I felt Bianca's backstory and plotline were poorly written to a point where I did not want her to get with Varric. I did not root for her. I found her to be a lying, manipulative, annoying bitch who just was not redeemable. I thought her plotline was a complete waste of time, and I would have much rather have used that time doing the DLC way underground than dealing in any capacity with her and her character. Another thing I dislike is how Red Lyrium is still hanging around after the quest to destroy it. Granted, there's probably some big quest that's going to happen in Dreadwolf with Red Lyrium, but even then, it's just another loose end that they kept open in Inquisition. Like, they've kept so many loose ends and so many of the other games just open with no hope of actually resolving any of these massive problems that have carried throughout many games. I wanted to see more interaction between Cullen and Alistair and their ex-Templar background, more interactions between Alistair and Morgan, and more interactions between Leliana and Morgan. We've got these major characters from Origins, and none of them interact in this game despite being necessary for plot. It was a huge waste of an opportunity for them to give us some kind of not only deeper lore and backstory, but also fan service, and they just did not deliver. I'm not sure if there's some greater plot reason as to why. I know Morgan was super awkward about Kieran meeting Alistair, especially if Alistair's his dad, but they just did not do enough with it, as I would have liked them to, for how long of a game it is. In conclusion, these are some of my dislikes for the Dragon Age series as a whole. I definitely have way more, but these are the ones that I really wanted to talk about in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to have fun doing what you love.